To the many who've shown interest in what we do on Tanna Island, and those who've asked so many times what exactly is that you do there and tell me about this island, I'd like to share 5 short videos about what it is that we're going to do and why it is that we go. So where in the world is White Sands area of Tanna Island, Vanuatu? Well, you see Australia to the left, and all the way over the horizon you would see Los Angeles, California, and the western U.S. coast. In the middle of Australia, New Zealand to the south, and the Fiji Islands just to the right of center, you'll see a Y-shaped chain of islands that has 95 islands where there's 120 languages spoken. And this volcanic Y-shaped chain of islands is called Vanuatu. You see to the north Espiritu Santo, where James Michener wrote Tales of the South Pacific in World War II, and where our soldiers were stationed to protect some of the southern hemisphere from the Japanese onslaught that was taking place in Midway and Guadalcanal and the Solomon Islands just north of Vanuatu. Port Vila is the capital on the island of Efate, which is in the center of Vanuatu, and you see it's a small coastal city that's about the size actually of Mountain View, Arkansas, where we live and our hometown is. Our soldiers were stationed there and flew in the early 1940s as we built up to fight the Japanese after D-Day, after Pearl Harbor. And those soldiers were stationed in makeshift Quonset huts in the jungle. And after World War II, we have a place here called $1 Million Point, where because it was so expensive to transport all of our military hardware back, it was dumped off the coast of Espiritu Santo and islands like it. And you have now places where divers will go and even have patients who helped our soldiers in World War II. And this is a man named Wilson who showed me the dog tag of the American soldier that he helped. We work on Tanna Island primarily, which is in the south. And Tanna Island is an island that's 26 miles long and about 8 miles wide. You see that the area outlined in white is White Sands. We work there primarily with one language group in White Sands language. You see that that area is bounded by a volcano on the south and by North Tanna on the north and a mountain ridge on the west. When you fly into Tanna, you see this high-peaked northern coast where the initial volcanic eruption started as the mountain grew north, or the island grew northward and westward. It's a very rugged high coast to what Captain Cook would have seen in 1777 when he landed just off the southern coast of the volcano there. We have a wall full of Captain Cook's actual journal pages about Tanna Island and its natives, and we've collected many of these over the years. John Williams was the man who introduced the gospel of Christ to the island country, what was called then the New Hebrides. He came to Erromango in 1848 to a people much like this. He had been in the Polynesian Islands for a brief time before, but desired to go to what we now know as Vanuatu in 1848, and he was promptly martyred the day that he got off of his boat on Erromango Island, which is about 20 miles north of where we work on Tanna. That inlet there that you see at the center of your screen with the river meeting the ocean is the actual beach where John Williams was murdered, and then the cannibals ate he and his compatriot that were killed with him. And they still to this day grieve what their ancestors did and believe that Erromango is cursed because of their history. Those were not the last missionaries that were martyred there. George Gordon and his wife were martyred there approximately 12 years later. One of the babies that the Gordons had passed away from natural causes to the left there where the small child sits. And many of these missionaries you can see later in our mission history video. You see then that John Patton was called from Scotland to go to Tanna, and he moved there with his young wife and child. And you'll see a picture that's important to his life later in a spot that I still go to. John Patton had many conflicts with the natives who hated what they called, quote, the work, end quote, because they were afraid that it was going to ruin their traditional religion. And that is still going on now, even 150 years later, and we combat the same forces that exist there now. John Patton would have seen a scene much like this that is off the back porch of the little house that Carrie and I work out of, as this young man goes out to fish and hunt for lobsters. And Tanna is a beautiful island. It is a volcanic island. That's Mount Yasser. And you see that when an earthquake comes and a lake breaks down, you'll have a sudden waterfall created. We've taken many teams. These are two friends who went with us in 2012, and you see Mount Yasser from a different viewpoint. You see from a plane above the cauldron, there are two vents in that cauldron, and sometimes it is very violent and shakes the entire island. This is a day where the ash turned gray, and we had people with asthma attacks all the way on the northeast part of the island for days and days because of this. It is a active volcano, and you can walk around on the top rim. The lava bombs are very large, some of them as large as a car. And other parts of the island are just serene and beautiful, like this coral beach that you can walk out on in sturdy shoes and hop off and have diving experiences that are not unlike what you might see on the Great Barrier Reef. Some of the most beautiful things I've ever seen are on this island, and one of the most beautiful sights is to swim up to that wall and dive under that wall into what you would see, which is a caved-in small cave where the sunlight shines through. And I hope to show more people that in the future when they go with us to Tanna. This is a different view of the backside of Mount Yasser and the mountain that's connected to it, and what was once Lake Siwi, which was a 3 billion gallon lake that emptied out in just a few minutes after a large earthquake in the early 2000s. We work on the north part of the island. You can see there between the two limbs a small outcropping of rock, and that rock is much larger the closer you get to it. As you proceed northeast on the island, you have to climb up a hill if you go one direction, and that's my wife Carrie there, to get over to our small place that we work. Different view of that large rock with a pharmacist friend who went with me in 2012. And you come to this little cove of black sand beach where our home village of Lonangi that requested that they give us our own road, and we have our own mission work through our local church there in 2008. And the small house that we work out of there in the village of Lonangi. This is actually what a title deed to a piece of land looks like in the native language. And then the children are like they are everywhere. They like to get out on our little rafts and body surf. And I can assure you that there's no feeling quite like having a small native child yell, "Shark, shark," as you've just gotten on your boogie board to ride a wave in. Tanna is a beautiful place. It's serene, and we love this scene off of our back porch at night as the moon rises. And you see the moonlight ripple off the waters. And we'll pick this up in our next video, which is the mission history of Tanna. Thank you.